Yes.
And my screen is also visible to all of you, right?
Yes.
Right. So yesterday we have started our ASP.NET Core MVC syllabus, and yesterday we have discussed what exactly this MVC design pattern is all about. What is a model? What is the role and responsibility of a model? What is controller? What is the role and responsibility of a controller? And what is view? And what is the role and responsibility of a view? And as part of model, what are the things you can do? As part of a view, what are the things you can do? And as part of controller, what are the things you can do? And we also discuss what we should not be do inside the view and what we should not do inside the controller, right? So basically controller is means to manage the overall execution flow of your application. Inside controller, you should not have any business logic, you should not have any validation logic, you should not have any data access logic. Then what will be there inside the controller? Controller means it will it will get the required data from the model. Controller means it will select which view to be rendered for a given request, right? That is the one and only. These are the two only responsibility of a controller: deciding which models to be used so that I can work with the model, deciding which view to be rendered, right? This is the things which is going to be done by the controller. What is model? Model means it contains a set of classes to store the business data, to store the what I can say domain data, right? As well as it also contains classes to manage the data. Manage the data in the sense it will having some classes which going to be work with the right data access logic, where you can put the business logic, validation logic. All these things should be there inside your model component. What is view? View, the one and only responsibility of a view is to render the domain data or business data into the UI, right? So view means it is having the in ASP.NET Core MVC. If you are talking, we are going to use the Razor syntax, right? Razor syntax nothing is nothing but it is HTML plus C sharp. So you can have HTML content plus you can have a C sharp content. But whatever C sharp code what you are going to write, it should be related to rendering the model data, right? You should not write any kind of logic inside your view, right? Even though it is possible, but it is not recommended. What is the responsibility of view? Rendering the data. For rendering purpose, whatever logic is required using C sharp, that you can write. But you should not write any right method call. You should not write any validation, any calculation. Those things should be avoided as part of your right. So now what I'm going to discuss how to set up MVC in ASP.NET Core application. As we already discussed, using ASP.NET Core, we can develop different kind of applications. We can develop RazorPages application. We can develop model view controller based application. We can develop web API application. So let us try to understand how we can set our .NET Core application as a MVC, right? So basically, in how we are going to set up MVC in our ASP.NET Core application. See, first of all, you need to understand using middleware component only we can develop the entire ASP.NET Core application, but that is not a good programming, right? Because whatever why it is not good, because if you want to develop some HTML pages, some HTTP based APIs, right, then that is not going to be work. For spark development, single page application, ASP.NET Core is good, but for developing multi-layer application, right, multi-pages application, HTTP based means RESTful services, you need to use some different things. So now I'm going to show you how you can set up a MVC in ASP.NET Core application. See, by default, if you are going to use ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller project template, then by default, whatever things required to make your application as the MVC application, everything is going to be provided by the Visual Studio only. But before using that ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller project template, let me tell you how you can set up the MVC in your ASP.NET Core MT application. So basically, I'm going to show you how you can configure the required MVC services, required modular component, how you can create a controller manually, how you can create the model folder, model classes manually, how you can create views manually. And once we discuss all these things, then I will start developing MVC using the model view controller template, and then you will definitely understand what all these individual components are. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new ASP.NET Core MVC application. Let me open Visual Studio 2022. And once I open the Visual Studio 2022, you know how to create a empty MVC, empty ASP.NET Core application. So select this, create a new project window, right? So here you can see you are having filter, which programming language you want to use. I want to use C#. For what operating system you want to develop this application? I want to develop this application using Windows, right? If you are having other operating system, that you can also select Mac, you can select Linux, you can select you are developing any Android, Azure, iOS application, all these things. And if you don't want any platform specific, you can also select all platform. Then what kind of application? I want to develop a web application. I want to develop web API. No, I'm going to develop web application. So select web. So once you select this, then you will see these are the template. And there is a template ASP.NET Core empty project template. Select this template, click on the next button, provide the project name, whatever name you want to give your project, select the location where you want to create the project. Solution name, you can keep same as it is the project name. Even though if you want, you can give a different name, right? But here I'm going with the same name because see, if your solution going to contain multiple project, in that case, you can give a different name to your solution. But if your solution going to project a single, right, project, if your solution going to project contain a single project, then in that case you can keep both project and solution name same. It doesn't make any sense, right? It is not a problem at all, right? If it is different, then you can give a different solution name. Next, click on the next button. Once you click on the next button, then you need to select the .NET framework, which one you want to use. Currently, this LTS supported is .NET 6. So I'm going to select .NET 6. Configure HTTPS, right? Configure HTTPS means what? Now I want to access the application URL using both HTTP and HTTPS protocol. So I have to select this checkbox. Currently, I'm not going to use Docker, so I'm disabling this Docker. And here you can see, do not use top level statement is there, right? So what exactly
Uh,
it means? It means, yeah,
hi Pranaya. So like a question. So like one solution can contain multiple projects, right?
right.
Okay, got it.
And sir,
Yes.
uh, operating system you selected Windows, right? Is it recommended to select all so that it can be used
Yes,
anywhere?
that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. So why I'm selecting Windows means I want to filter the things, right? Let me show you this thing once more. So here I'm selecting Windows. Windows means only these project templates are available, right? If I select all platform, then what will happen? All the plot, right? Whatever the project you can develop, that is available. But in this case, you can see that's no difference because I'm selecting this web. So using all right web project template, right? If you want to develop web application, what are the project templates available that you can use here, right? So if you select what I can say Linux, then you can see these are the things, same things are going to be available. So using Linux operating system, you can develop this project, right? And here, if I select all, right, all project template, then you will see multiple, right? These are the project which you can develop using Linux, right? If I use Windows, then you will see there are a lot. See, comparing to Linux, here many other things are available, right?
So this part is only to select the kind of
Right,
template.
yes, yes.
Yes, that.
So it's just like a filter you can consider. So it is
Oh,
going to
got
filter
it.
the things.
It has nothing to do like if I select all, that can be installed anywhere, any
No, no,
operating.
nothing. So it is just going to filter the kind of a project you want to develop, right? So for that purpose, I'm selecting Windows and I'm going to develop web application. So I'm just selecting web. So it is going to just filter the project template, nothing else.
Got it. Thank you.
Right? Then I'm going to select this configure HTTPS. Do not use top level
One more
statement.
question, sir. Sir, here you
Yes.
said configure HTTPS. Means that can be used any outside the network. Uh,
No, see, I think we have already discussed this thing in great detail, right? If I select this configure for HTTPS, then you will see in launch settings.json file, right? For the profile, right? Where it is going to create two profile, one for custodial server and one for IIS Express server. And in that profile, you will see two protocols, one using HTTP and another one using HTTPS. If you checked this one, then HTTPS will be available. If you unchecked this one, HTTPS will not be available.
Okay.
I will
So
show you this one.
in general, if we have to expose the application outside
No,
of the
no, no.
net.
See, it doesn't matter. See, whenever you are going to production server, as I already mentioned, as I already told you many times, in production, does this launch settings start this available? Production, it is not available. It is completely in your development environment. In development environment, you want to feel what exactly happening in production. Can I access using HTTP? Can I access using HTTPS? Can I redirect with the request HTTP to HTTPS? So all these things are available. So I just want to give you a flavor, right? How it is going to work. For that purpose, I am selecting this, right? It is nothing to do with the production. Production is going to be completely different. If you want, see, if you whatever settings, right, launch settings file will become in our project. It is not going to be. There's no link between the production and launch settings, right? As I already told you many times, launch settings it's not going to be available in the production. Production is completely different, and that launch settings.json file it is going to behave like the server in your development application, right?
Got got it. Thank you.
And so once you create this application, then you will see that, right, that launch settings.json file. So inside this launch settings.json file, you can see this is HTTPS URL and this is HTTP URL. And this HTTPS URL is coming because of that checkbox which you select, enable HTTPS. And this is for the custodial server and for IIS server also you can see this is the HTTP URL and this is the port number, and for HTTPS URL this is the port number, right? So now you can see this is the default code which is provided by Visual Studio, and we have already discussed many times this statement is for what? This statement is going to set the web host. And this statement is going to create the web application, build a right web application instance. And using this web application instance, we can set the request processing pipeline. And here we are just adding one middleware component to the request processing pipeline, that is map-get. And what is this map-get means? It is only response to the get request from the URL. And again, the URL should have end with this slash, right? Means it will only execute when the request URL is the root URL. And this application.run method we have already discussed what is the use. It is going to start the web server, right? Once the web server is start, then only your application can listening to the HTTP request. So this is the default project or a default file, what you can say when you create the MVC empty application. Now, give me 1 minute, guys. Right? So now, so guys, now I will show you how you can set the MVC in your ASP.NET Core application, right? So first we need to do what we need to do. We need to add the MVC services as well as MVC middleware components to the application processing pipeline, right? So to do so, what we need to do? 1 minute. Okay. So what we need to do in order to make our ASP.NET Core MVC application, in order to make our ASP.NET Core application to behave like a MVC application, we need to do few things, right? First of all, we need to add the required MVC services to the application processing pipeline. Second, what we need to do, we need to add the required middleware components to the request processing pipeline. So once we add the MVC services, right, then what we'll do, it will behave like a MVC application. And then we need to configure the middleware component so that when the request is come, then it will work like a MVC application, right? So let us see how we can do this thing, right?
Hello.
So you can see here you can see I'm adding one services builder that services that add method as we already know. So whenever we create this, whenever this statement is executed, web application that create builder. So some of the default services it is automatically implemented, right? I collection, I services, right? So basically some of the caching related services, logging related services, environment related services. Already some of the services are implemented, but if you want to add any framework related services, then what you need to do, you need to use this services property of this builder object. So builder dot services and this add MVC method is there. Apart from this add MVC method, other options are also available, right? Like add controller with views, AddRazorPages, right? Many other options are available. That also we are going to discuss in detail. We are also going to discuss what is the difference between each of these services in detail. But for now, you can use this add service dot add MVC method, right? Add MVC method to add the MVC services to the request processing pipeline. So what you need to do, you just need to come here, builder dot. Once you type, then you will see services. This services property is basically used to configure the framework related services. So what is framework related services? What is application services, right? The services which is provided by the .NET framework is nothing but framework services, and the services which we are going to create for our own purpose is application service. We will discuss what is application service, how to configure application service in after one or two classes when we discuss the dependency injection in ASP.NET Core, right? At that time I will explain what is. So for now you can make use of this AddMvc, right? AddMvc method, right? So once you add this, so this basically it is add the MVC services to the request processing pipeline. Request processing pipeline. So once you add the MVC services, then what you need to do, right?
Hi.
So yes,
So Pranay, when you say services, so services means we can consider like it's a features we want in our application.
see, services means what? Hmm. If let me first ask you the question: do you have any experience on dependency injection?
No.
You do not know what is dependency injection design pattern?
So no, actually I do not know the dependency
Okay, so
injection pattern.
suppose there are two classes, right? Let me tell you this thing. This is class A, and I'm having I'm having class B, right? And this class B having some method. Method one, method two, right? Like this, so many methods. Method three. Now class A wants to consume some of the method of class B. Then what you need to do? You need to create B obj, and then you
Object
need
of
to start calling the method using the right like this,
yes,
right? Be obj dot method one or whatever. So you start executing something like this. Yes or no?
yes.
So this is tight coupling, right? Tight coupling means what? And suppose tight coupling means what? Now today
If
if you rename the class B, right? Then what you need to do?
I need to change in class A as well.
Right? If you rename this implementation is there. But now you want to do some kind of unit testing, or some, suppose this code is communicate with the SQL Server database. Now you want to create another version where it should communicate with the MySQL database. So for that purpose, you create another class file and you have written the logic accordingly. So now you want to use this logic, right? You want this class A consume the method of class C. Then what you need to do? You need to do some changes inside this class. Yes or no?
Yes.
So this is nothing but this is tight coupling. So whenever a class is directly consuming the member of another class by creating the instance, this is nothing but tight coupling. Why it is tight coupling? Because A know about B. So here A is knowing the class. There is a class called B. I'm creating the class and calling the method. So in this case, what this service means? Well, so this class A is consuming some of the method of class B, means class A consuming some of the services provided by class B,
Okay.
right? So here, method A means it is going to perform some task.
Mhm.
Task is something that it is going to execute some logic, right? It is going to, so for this purpose, you can say this class A consuming the services provided by class B,
Okay.
right? So
Yes.
instead of doing that, what we need to do, we need to find a better mechanism, right? Better mechanism in the sense. Now we want to find a better mechanism means I'm going to create some interface, right? Interface I, and this interface I going to declare this method AB123, right? All this method are going to be declared, and here B is implementing I and C is implementing I. Right? So this you should know this thing. This is your interface, and this is one class implementing the interface, providing implementation for the interface member. This is another class implementing the interface, providing methods for this class, right? Providing the interface
Yes.
member. Now what you need to do, instead of creating the instance, so what you will do, you will make use of this class constructor. So this class constructor means it is going to right. This is class A. And what you will do here, you will declare one variable of type interface. Can I declare a variable of a type interface? Yes, we
Yes.
cannot create an instance of interface, but we can create a reference variable of interface. Yes or no?
Yes.
Now, there are many mechanisms. I'm just doing the constructor, right? Can I create a variable of type constructor within this class? Is that possible?
Mm.
Can I create a parameter of type
Oh,
interface?
yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
So inside this parameter, whatever object it is going to hold, can I assign that with our I variable? Is that possible? This statement is valid or not?
Mm.
Yes.
Interface yes, it is possible.
And somehow, if we inject, right, while creating the instance of a class A, if I inject, right, this class B instance, is that acceptable?
Yes.
If I inject class B, is that acceptable?
Yes,
Yes.
because it's inheriting that interface.
Right. So
Okay.
now, instead of using this obj, can I use this I and call the method?
Yes.
Yes. We can.
Yes or no?
Yes, it is possible.
So in this case, does it matter whether you are using class P, you are using class C, or you are going to use class T? If you change this implementation, do you need to do any kind of changes in your class A?
No.
No. So this is nothing but what? Dependency
Loosely
injection.
coupled. Dependent,
Loosely
yes.
coupled, right? So in this case, we need to find a way, right, where we need to inject this object,
Okay.
right? So in
One
this case,
question.
injecting means what? Now, if I want to consume the services which is provided by this interface, then I need to inject I need to find a way to inject the interface I related services, right? So in this case, you
Mhm.
can consider interface I means it is going to provide some services, and I want to consume those services in my class, right? So this is nothing but you are injecting or you are configuring the interface in your application, because at some point of time you need to consume the operations, right, which is provided by this interface. So interface providing services, and these services you want to consume. So currently what I want to use, I want to use the MVC application, MVC services, right? If you want to use the MVC services, right, in your application, then what you need? You need to inject the MVC interface or MVC services into your application,
Yes.
and that is what is going to be done by this
Uh,
mock the
Small doubt.
services AddMvc method. So internally this service is nothing but it is a I collection, right? I service collection, and a collection of services for the application to compose, right? This is useful for adding user provided or framework provided services. So services means what? Whatever I just explained, right? So in this case, so the way we are going to inject the dependency object using the constructor of this class, right? I'm going to inject the dependency object using the constructor, but how? But where you need to define that logic? If you are working with any kind of MVC framework application, an inject is there, unit container is there, right? Using those framework, you need to provide, yes, this is my interface, and for this interface, please create wherever this interface is used, then please inject the object of this type, right? Using those container, we are writing those logic so that anywhere you will find that logic, right? Unit container. So whenever it will find that interface inside any constructor or method, automatically the container is going to inject the object, right? Whatever you configure for that interface, right? That concept is simplified in our ASP.NET Core MVC application. Means what? Now built-in dependency injection is provided to us. Built-in dependency injection is provided to us, means we do not need to use any kind of a unit container like a n unit, like a inject, right? Those are not going to be we are not supposed to be used. If you want, you can use, yeah, because it is already provided the support. So how? Because in this case it is providing this iService collection, and for this iService collection, right, whatever uh, user provided services, whatever built-in services, right, you want to configure, right, that you can configure. And currently this is a built-in services. Built-in services means you need to use this AddMvc method. So how I can provide my user defined services, we will see that in detail, right? There is a chapter separately I have created, that is ASP.NET Core dependency injection. In that time I will show you how you can create your own service, how you can use the service with different scopes, how you can make your service object to be single done, transient, scope, right? All these things we are going to develop. But in this case, this is nothing but your built-in service. So once you add this builder that services that add MVC method, means what is required to develop the web MVC application, right? Model you can create now in your application. Controller you can create in your application. View you can create in your application. How it is possible? Because you are adding the services. See, if so in this case, if I am not injecting this interface I into this class, then can I call this method? If I'm not
No.
injecting, if I'm not using this services interface, then can I consume this method?
No.
No. So similarly, if you want to use model, if you want to use controllers, if you want to use views into your application, then first of all you need to use the services, right? So that you can consume those things. So for that purpose, I'm using this AddMvc method. Apart from this AddMvc method, other options are also available, right? That what we are going to discuss after some time. I will also tell you what is the difference between them, when to use what services, right? Yes. Any question from anyone?
Pranay, I'm having one question, but I think it will be covered later on, right? If I'm whatever can you show me the screen for the interface you have written the notepad?
Sorry?
Can you show me the screen where you have written the interface and the classes?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So here, for example, class B is having a parameters constructor. In that case we will discuss later, right? When we are implementing the code.
So class B having parameter constructor means I'm not getting that question.
Let us assume that class B, I have created a constructor. So it is having one or two parameters.
See, first of all,
They
you
are
need to
each.
understand. First of all, you need to understand. If your class B having some constructor or whatever, right? Is that making any sense? Because I'm not going to use that class B constructor parameter here, right? So I'm assuming that whatever the structure this interface provide, that interface method I'm only going to consume, right? If this interface having some other methods, method 4, sorry, in this class, having method 4 and method 5, you can't consume them here.
Yeah, yeah. But constructor, when class B is having a constructor, then how can we pass those values to that constructor?
So that is not possible now. Here in this case, you need to create parameterless constructor, right? And whenever
Okay,
implementing dependency injection design pattern, there should not be any provision that your class going to contain some kind of a right parameterized constructor. If you want
okay,
data, then that data should be provided to the method only, not to the constructor.
okay, got it. That means for the parameter constructor, we can't implement that dependency
No,
injection.
parameters. If you are creating parameter constructor, then this class taking 2 parameter, this class taking 3 parameter, right? It will make confusion. See,
But
in this
right,
case,
right.
you only need to use parameterless constructor, right?
Okay,
Otherwise, don't define any constructor. Default constructor will come into the picture,
okay,
right?
got it. Thanks.
And guys, remember one thing I'm telling you: design patterns are very, very, very important, right? Right? Because going further, I'm going to use the dependency injection design pattern, repository design pattern, right? And many more other design patterns. And you should have very good understanding related to design patterns, because, right? Because until and unless you are not aware about all such design patterns, what are the Django for 23 design patterns, how I can implement a unit container in my application, repository design pattern using entity framework code, right? All these things, if you do not, then it will be very difficult task for you. And implementing design pattern is a good thing, and understanding design pattern is very easy, right? If you know the basic C# concept, OOPS concept, and then that's it. Design pattern you can easily understand, and try to learn the design patterns, because that is very, very important. Right? Until and unless you are not aware about the design patterns, right? It will be very difficult to write robust application code, reusable code in your application. Design pattern makes your life easy. Just try to learn the design pattern. And guys, remember, dependency injection is the mandatory one, because inbuilt support provided for the dependency injection design pattern in ASP.NET Core. So if you are having some idea, then that is well and good. But see, whatever design patterns required for our application, right? While I'm developing that, what I'm going to tell you, how to use repository, how to use dependency injection, right? But I'm not supposed to explain all the design patterns, right? All the 23 design patterns. You need to learn them separately, right? So once you have created this, once you are the service, then what do we need to do? Now I can start developing the MVC component, right? For that purpose, by default, right? By default, what MVC framework saying? So the controller should be created inside a controller folder. Views should be created inside the views folder. Model can be stored anywhere. Model can be stored anywhere, but as per the recommended by Microsoft, models not Microsoft, as per the recommended by MVC design pattern, model should be created. A model, if you create inside the models folder, it will be good. But it is not mandatory. But mandatory thing for controllers and views, but for model it is optional. But it is a good programming practice to put all the models inside the models folder. Let me create a folder called controller, right? So what is controller? I'm going to discuss again in detail, right? There is a separate chapter for controller. I'm going to tell what exactly controller, all these things, right? For now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a controller with the name home controller.cs, right? So what I'm going to tell you, so I'm just going to add a class file, and I'm providing the class name as controller.cs. That's it. So once you create the controller, your folder structure should be like this. So you can see this is the controller folder. And inside this controller folder, I'm having one controller called the home controller. The name should be end with the controller, right? Again, we'll discuss this controller component in detail. For now, what you need to do, you just copy paste. Just copy paste the code, right? So this is a controller inheriting from the controller base class. Everything I'm going to discuss, what is controller, how the controller instance is created, right? Right. So all these things we are going to discuss because these are the things which is not aware by many what I can say many even the senior experienced developer they do not. So technically, if you see this is a class, this is a method, and can anybody who are working with the MVC framework can they relate this to MVC framework? Is there any difference?
No.
Anybody who is there who working on ASP.NET MVC?
Yeah, actually in Windows, here the controller is there that can be used for API and for MVC, same controller can be used.
No, that is yes, that is yeah, that is not my question. My question is, this structure, whatever I'm creating, right? Is it similar to the controller which we created in our ASP.NET MVC application?
It's similar, but I don't
Yes,
see
sir.
any action
Same.
result method.
See,
Similar.
see, there also you can see if you are wondering about the action result method, let me do that also. Na? So you are talking, you are creating something like this, right?
Yes.
Yes. Now it is fine. Yes or no?
That looks same.
Yes.
It looks same. So first of all, tell me, this is a method or not?
Yes.
Yes, it's your next method.
Static method or non-static method?
Not static.
For non-static method, how you can call the method? For in the case of non-static, what you need to do
With the
in order
class
to call
name.
that? Sorry?
With the class name. With the class
We
name.
need to create a reference and
Class
we need
name.
to call.
So class
No,
name
no.
or you need instance?
No, we
Instance.
need
Sta-
with the class name.
So how you can call the
Instance.
non-static method using class name?
No,
If it
no,
is static, then
non-static
you
with
need to,
the non-static
non-static
with the
means you need
object.
to create an instance only, right?
Yes, yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
But is there in your MVC application, have you write any code where you are creating the instance of the controller class and invoking the method?
No.
How is that? But do you? But without the instance, is it possible to invoke this method?
Maybe it is using reflection or something inbuilt.
Right? Yes, it is using the concept called reflection. But do you know how exactly reflection work? How exactly you can use reflection to dynamically create an instance of a class and invoke the method?
No.
I guess
Right?
at the end of C# new features you taught us this reflections.
So C# new features means what? Do you think that the ASP.NET MVC comes with the C# new feature or it was there from C# 3 or 4, what I can say?
It is initially there.
It
I
is
don't know
initially there.
yeah,
No,
at the end of C# lectures, you told us like the reflection topics it will comes in the ASP.NET Core
no,
lectures.
no, that is not true. So reflection means it is internal framework uses, right? So framework to inspect the metadata of an assembly, right? They are using the concept called reflection, right? So whenever you create an instance of a class, right? For example, if I'm creating one string object, string obj equals to some value, right? And if I'm writing obj dot, immediately it is giving me some kind of a intelligence, right? How it is providing, what are the constructor, what are the method, right? What are the public properties constructor method, right? All these things I'm getting as soon as I type the object name and dot. How it is possible? This is possible because of the concept called reflection, right? And the guys, right, to whoever right work with the ASP.NET MVC, please try to learn how exactly the MVC framework create an instance of the controller and invoke this index action method. This is implemented absolutely. It is implemented using reflection, no doubt about it. But you have to know how I can create how I can manually create a method, how I can create a class, and how I can dynamically create an instance of that and execute that method. How if there are multiple methods, same method with a different parameter, so, right? Then how it is going to decide which method to be invoked. So those things you need to understand, right? Until and unless you are not doing such thing manually, then you will not understand this thing practically, right? Even though if you do not understand this thing, that will not cause a major problem because this is internally handled by the framework. But you need to understand this thing. If this is an action method, means this is a method and this is a class. Without creating an instance of this class, I cannot invoke this method. That is 100%. Then if this method is executing, then someone in behind the scene creating an instance of this class and invoking this method. How he know that I need to create an instance of this class? How the framework know if there are multiple method, right? If there is index method, right? Apart from index method, right? There are other method as well. I'm creating 1, 2, 3. There is index method 1, index method 2, and this index method taking some string parameters, right? So how the framework decide that I need to invoke this method or this method or this method? So you need to understand this
Based on
thing.
your
Sorry.
controller
Then
slash was if I give controller slash home, then it will by reflection using reflection it will create the instance of that particular controller.
no, that is not my question. My question: how internally framework uses this concept,
Okay.
right? So
Because we are having
definitely, if
MVC.
in the URL, if I'm passing some string value, definitely this index method is going to be executed. But my question is, suppose instead of this home controller class, I want to create in my application, I just want to create some class, right? I'm just going to create some class. Instead of returning this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to return string value, right? Instead of returning this, I'm going to return some string value. Now my question is how I can invoke this method. I want to
Because
create,
we
I
have
want
added
to,
middleware. We
sorry?
have added the middleware. We have added
No,
the
no,
middleware. It is having access.
forget about ASP.NET Core and all this thing. I'm not talking ASP.NET Core and anything. Now my
Okay.
question is, I want, right? I want to execute this index method and this index method, but I don't want to create an instance of this class manually, and I don't want to invoke this method manually. But I want to execute at runtime.
Yeah.
That is what I'm giving you guys as a task. Definitely, I'm going to explain this concept tomorrow, no doubt about it, right? But you guys, I'm giving this as a task to you guys. Please
I
create a
think we need
console
to create
application.
delegate for this.
Sorry.
Delegate.
So why you are going to use delegate in this case? I'm talking using reflection only. Using reflection only, you need to create an instance of this sum class dynamically, and you need to invoke this index method dynamically. Whatever this data is returning, that you need to print on the console. You need to create method with parameter, method without parameter, right? So here you can create, in this case, it is taking data returning. So you can also create another version where it is going to take the data but returning void, not taking any data and not returning anything, right? How you can invoke this thing, see, from using
Sir,
reflection? That is what my,
can we use
sorry.
like a abstract? Sir, can we use like abstract class by using virtual override table?
I'm talking only using reflection. I'm not talking about
Okay.
abstract class interface, nothing. So I don't want to create an instance of this class. I don't want to invoke this method manually, but I want to create an instance and invoke this method at runtime by using the concept called reflection. That is what my task. Clear, guys?
Yes.
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 Because see, this is the thing. Because until and unless you do not understand this reflection concept, right? Lambda expression, anonymous method, delegates. So it will be difficult for you only to understand. If you do not know what is asynchronous programming, parallel programming, right? You will understand the ASP.NET Core concept, no doubt about it. I will explain definitely. but you will not become a good programmer until and unless you are not aware about such things. Reflection. See, if framework using this concept, then why I can't use? Then how to use? How I can implement? Once you implement only, then you will understand. Until and unless you are not implementing, you will not understand. So in this case, whenever I'm creating object, calling the dot method, it is giving me the list of public methods available inside that type. So you also need to find a mechanism where you need to figure out what are the public method properties constructor available inside that class. How I can get all these things. Just try to do this. This is I'm giving you as a task. And guys, once you implement the code, please put the code in that group, right? A discussion group, right? So now what I'm going to do, I'm just removing these things, and I'm not going to return a view. So anything you can view or return. I'm going to return a string, right? So I'm going to return a string from this action method. What is action method? What is controller? All these things we are going to discuss. But now we are just keep focusing on how we can set up the MVC into our ASP.NET Core empty application. So basically, this is one controller having one method, and we want this method statement to be executed when we run the application. Now run the application. See, is that action method what we have created inside the home controller? Is that executed, or the middleware component which we said here is executed? Which one is executed, guys?
What is there in the middleware component?
So the middleware component is only going to be executed. So, but I don't want this to be executed. I want whenever the application run, my home controller index action method should be executed, right? Even though if I type something like this, right? home/index, see what happens. That means there is a that means that the controller index action method is not at all invoked from the URL. Why is this? Because so as I mentioned here, if you only configure the services until and unless if you are not calling that method, is that method is going to execute automatically?
No.
No. That means what? Now, registering the services is not enough. Configuring the MVC services is not enough. What we need to do? We need to configure the MVC middleware component also. Right? There are two things. One is services, another is middleware component. Services means it is going to decide what are the services your application is going to use. And middleware component means it will decide how the application is going to handle the incoming request. Right? For that purpose, adding only MVC services is not enough. Along with MVC services, what we need to do, we need to add the MVC middleware component into the request processing pipeline so that whenever the request will come, the MVC middleware component will execute the controller action method and all these things. So how we can do this, right? For that purpose, what we need to do, we need to use one endpoint routing, right? So basically, let me copy this code, right? And now I'm not going to use that app map get method because once we configure MVC routing, then it will not it will take more priority and this will not use anymore, right? So what exactly what we need to do? We need to use two endpoints. One is app use routing, another one is use endpoints. So this app.use routing means it is a pattern matching mechanism. Whenever the request comes, it will map, right? That request is for which endpoints. And using this endpoint routing, we can configure the middleware components, right? So in this case, we are configuring MVC middleware component. And how I'm going to configure? I'm using the Lambda expression only. So here you can see I'm using this endpoints and I'm calling this map default controller route. So this map default controller route endpoint exactly configure the MVC middleware component to the request processing pipeline. So earlier I have told you Using this huge endpoint, you can configure any multiple multiple middleware components. And whenever the request comes, this app.use routing method will decide this request is for which endpoint, and whatever the request whatever the endpoints is decided by this use routing middleware component, that middleware component is going to be executed by this huge endpoints routing. So basically, if you say use routing means it matches a request to an endpoint, and use endpoints means it executes the matched endpoint. And in this case, we are defining the endpoints using the map default controller route method. And this map controller default route method is basically for configuring the MVC middleware component to the request processing pipeline. Apart from this map default controller route endpoint, we are having other endpoints also, right, which we can use with our MVC and Web API application. That is what we are going to discuss, right? We are going to discuss this routing concept in detail in our coming session. After 2 or 3 classes, right, I'm going to discuss routing separately, and I will explain everything related to routing. So for now, what you need to do in order to make your ASP.NET core application as a MVC application, you need 2 things. What are the things? You need to configure MVC services, and you need to configure the MVC middleware component. How you can configure the services? Using AddMvc method. Apart from AddMvc method, other methods are also available. That is what we are also going to discuss in today's session. And then you need to use this use endpoints routing. But if you want to use endpoints routing, it is mandatory to use routing, because this use routing middleware will match the endpoints, right? Whenever the request comes, which endpoints to be executed, right? Then once it matched, right, what endpoints to be executed, that endpoints is going to be executed by this use endpoints routing. So using this endpoint routing, you can configure any middleware component. We have already discussed. You can configure 1 middleware component, 2 middleware component, 3 middleware component, any number of middleware component. But in this example, I'm not configuring any number of middleware component. I'm only configuring 1 middleware component, that is MVC middleware component. And this MVC middleware component means now you can access your controller action method from the URL. Why? Because what is required, those things we have already done. MVC services, MVC middleware component. Once you configure the MVC services and middleware component, now you can run the application, and you will see that by default, right, that controller action method is this is index action method from MVC control. This is completely working fine, and this is executed. How it is executed, right? How it is handling. So if you want to understand how exactly this routing pattern are working, right, then what you need to do, you need to go to the definition of this map controller route extension method, right? If you click and go to the definition, then you will see that what is the default pattern for this index, how the URL pattern it configured. Those who are working with the ASP.NET MVC application, they might be know the concept called route config class file, right? In route config, you need to define the route pattern for your MVC application. And the same way, right, this is also going to define the route pattern. And what is the route pattern, right? As I already mentioned it, this ASP.NET Core MVC framework is open source. Open source means what? The source code is available on GitHub, and some of the source code you can also find in Visual Studio itself also. And you can see the source code of this method is already available. And if you look at this source code, then the URL pattern is something like this, right? The URL pattern means the URL can contain the controller, the action, and the ID parameter, which is optional parameter. And by default, if you do not specify the controller name, then which controller is going to be invoked? Home controller, right? If you do not specify the action method name, by default, which action method is going to execute? Index action method, right? And this ID parameter is optional. Now, if I do not specify anything in the URL, then by default, this home controller, this index action method is going to be executed. Now, you might be one question, sir, if I only specify the controller name, then what will happen? Then in that case, it will check the controller, and then it will check, yes, if the index action method is not specified, then what is the default default action? What you specified here, index, then that is what it is going to execute. So you can access this not only by using this URL, but if you only type home, then it is also going to execute. And if you type home.index, then also it is going to execute as expected, right? And this is the default URL pattern. Now you might be one question, sir, I don't want to use this default URL pattern. I want to create my own URL pattern. So before this one, I want to write something up slash or any. I don't want to use this action method, right? I want to use attribute routing. I just need to modify this structure. First of all, I don't want this controller name first. I want the action method name first, then the controller name. Is that possible? Yes, that is also possible. How? We'll discuss this thing once we start discussing the routing concept, right? So for now, it is not required. For now, you just need to understand how to configure the MVC services and middleware components. Clear, guys?
Yes.
Right. Now, as I mentioned, right, apart from this AddMvc method, we are having multiple methods, right? So we are having multiple method to set up the MVC request processing pipeline, right? So multiple method means what are the method? Let us try to understand, right? If you go to the AddMvc method definition, then you will see that right? Apart from this add MVC, you are having this what I can say add MVC, right? So you can see add MVC, add controller core, add controller core, right? Add controller with view, right? So these are the different what I can say methods that are available that you can use, right? So let me explain what are the available. See, basically, if you are working, then you will see whenever you are working with ASP.NET Core application, you need to use these four versions of the method, right, to configure the MVC services. What are one is add controllers, and another one is add controllers, which is taking the option argument, right? And we know, and we have already discussed what is this option parameter, option object is basically used. If you want to configure, if you want to customize, for the customization, you need to use the option. Means whatever the middleware component, it is going to be add option and it will start using that, right? So add controller with views, add MVC and add Razor pages. And each version, each method having two overloaded version. One doesn't take any parameter and other one takes the option object using which you can customize the requirement, right? Now the question what you might get in the interview, when to use add controller, when to use add controller with views, when to use add MVC, and when to use add Razor pages in our application to configure the request process, to configure the services, right? Let us understand. To understand this, first of all, you need to understand what are the features, right? What you can develop using application, right? So let me show you. Controllers, one concept is there. Model binding is one concept. API Explorer is one concept. Authorization is one concept. Course is one concept. Validations is one concept. Formatter mapping is one concept. Anti-forgery is one concept. Tame data, views, page, tag helpers, and support memory case. So these are the concept, right? Based on the method what you use in your application to configure the request to configure the MVC services, some or all of these functionality or features are available. So now let us discuss if I'm using this AddMvc method, right? Whether this support of controllers is available to AddMvc, AddController MVC, AddController, AddRazorPages or not, and what exactly this all these things, right? So this controller is available for all methods, right? So it doesn't matter whether you configure using add MVC, add controller with views, add controller, add Razor pages, right? You can create the controller. right? So you can use any of the four methods if you only need a controller. Controllers means what? Are responsible for controlling the flow of the application execution. When you make a request to MVC or Web API application, then it is the controller action method that will handle the request and the response, right? So this controller feature is available to all the four methods. Model binding, right? Model binding feature is also available for all four methods. So what is model binding? We'll discuss. See, whatever feature I'm explaining at this time, we'll discuss each of this feature in detail in our coming session. So model binding is basically used to map the incoming request data to the controller action method, right? So whenever you send a request, and as part of a request, you are sending some data, core string data, route data, request body data, right? Those data is going to be mapped to the parameter of the action method. How it is mapped automatically? It is nothing is automatically. They have written something in behind the scene which does the thing, which makes our life easy. And that thing is nothing but your model binder. Model binder will come into the picture. Model binder will check, inspect the request, right? And then model binder will get the request data from the core string, right? From the URI, from the request body, and then it will map the data to the parameter of the action method. So how it will identify that this is the request data. I need to map to this parameter. This is the request body, map to this, and request URI to this, right? So there are some different convention is there. Also, there are some customization is also available, right? By default, right? Request body will map to the I mean to the complex type parameter. URI data map to the what I can say that value type parameter, right? But if you want, you can also change this default behavior. We'll discuss all these things. Next one is API Explorer. Yes.
Yeah, Pranay, one doubt. But you said like whatever the URL which we are typing in the browser, it will be reaching to the controller by reflection method or whatever the method by using that method. But in
Right.
between the request and the the controller, there will be a middleware, right? You're talking about this middleware, AddController, any middleware that will help us to convert the data into the
No.
calling.
This middleware basically used to decide, right? Whenever the request is sent, and you send this request mentioning a home/index, right? So in that case, this middleware will decide which action method I need to execute,
Yeah, agreed. But
right?
between
But,
that, there will be some.
yeah, between that, if you are having some middleware for encryption, HMAC, decryption, whatever it means, those are definitely going to be executed. They are not related with this middleware component.
For example, I'm created an action method. Let us assume that I have created a class, let's class employee. From the front end, I'm passing employee ID, employee name, employee salary, and everything by using a post method. In that case, those parameters should be converted into the employee class. For that, the reflection thing is working.
No. Reflection means what? Now, reflection means only create the instance of the class, right?
Yes.
Invoke the
Yeah.
method, pass the parameter.
Yeah.
That's it. How that parameter will be mapped to the action method of your class. That is the role of a
Right.
model binder.
Right. But
Reflection means
the
only going to
that
decide
work who is doing,
sorry.
which component is doing that reflection and all.
So that is altered. That is what I'm going to explain tomorrow. But
Sorry.
before that,
Got
I just want to ask you, just try to understand how reflection is exactly what.
Yes. Got it.
Right? So tomorrow I'm going to discuss who comes into the picture, who create all these things, right? How, which class is which interface is this? What are the method they provided for creating the controller? How they are going to release the controller? That is what I'm going to discuss tomorrow. Because these things, right,
Got it.
you will not find anywhere. Nobody is going to explain these things. Because this is the things. If you want to become a good architecture, then you need to understand the internal things as well, right? Internally, how they are working. Clear?
Yeah.
So we will discuss
Got
that thing tomorrow. This is the reason why I asked you to learn a reflection before before attending tomorrow's session, so that you can easily, whenever I'm using, going to use the term reflection, I'm going to show you some right activator instance, right? So at that time you should not be confused what exactly this method is, how that method is going to create the instance, right? For that purpose, I just asked to learn the reflection, right? And again, while
Yes.
while I'm explaining this concept, right? Controller model binding explorer, right? Just remove that reflection concept from your mind. Otherwise, your mind will be there in the reflection topic only. Your mind will not concentrate on the topic which currently I'm explaining.
Yes.
Because
Got it.
this is the problem what I already faced in my, right? Whenever I have some doubt in my mind, right? Then my mind is only going to be stay in that doubt, right? Whatever the explaining, my mind will not come to that place. So just remove that reflection concept. Once this topic is completed, then just go and do some R&D. You will get, and if not, then definitely tomorrow I'm going to explain.
Yes.
So
Yes.
API
Understood.
Explorer means what? And if you want to expose what are the controller, what is the action method, what are the URLs, right? What are the allowed HTTP method, parameter, request type, response type, all these things, right? If you want to expose, then you need to use API Explorer, right? So basically, if you know there is a tool called Swagger, right? Swagger means it will give you all the information for a particular request. What is the request type? Right? What this request type accept as input parameter? What is the response this method is going to return? Right? All these things, if you want to express, then you need to use this API Explorer feature. And apart from AddRazorPages method, right? All other three methods supports this feature, right? Clear, guys?
Yes.
Right. So authorization means what? It is basically related to the security concept, right? Authorization basically it is determine whether the user or whether the authenticated user who is accessing your resource have authorized to access that particular resource or not. First of all, it should be authorized, authenticated user. If the user is not authenticated, authorization will not come into the picture. First authentication, then authorization, right? Once you are calling the you are using authorization means it is an authenticated user. Whether that authenticated user have rights to access a particular resource or not. That is what you can implement using this authorization. Basically, we are going to use something called authorized attribute, right? Using this authorized attribute, we can determine whether the user have access to this particular resource or not. Even though along with the authorization, we can use role-based authorization, right? So based on the user role, we can determine whether if the user of this if the user having the role admin, then he can access this method. If the user having the role super admin, then he can access. If the user having both the role, then he can access. Right? All these things is possible. What we are going to discuss in our upcoming session. And again, it is related to support security concept, right? So all the four available methods support this feature. Right? Course means what
Sir,
are those? Sorry.
sir, you will elaborate on Swagger in next
Yes,
session.
yes, definitely. Not in the next session, in our coming
Time
session,
later. Yeah, okay.
right? So, other definitely 100% I'm going to cover, right? Whatever I'm explaining here, everything I'm going to explain. This authorization, right? ASP.NET identity, right? This is the mostly demanded technology used for it is for the membership management, right? I'm going to use identity authorization, token-based authorization, role-based authorization, JWT token, or SMAC, encryption, decryption, everything I'm going to cover. No, don't worry at this time, right? So I'm just giving you a brief idea, right? Before starting the main concept, I'm just giving the basic idea. So course means if those who are working with ASP.NET Web API, they might face this issue. Course means course origin resource sharing, right? What exactly it happened whenever you are making an Ajax call from a different browser, then by default the browser doesn't allow to make Ajax to a different domain, right? Suppose your application, Web API application is hosted in some domain 2, and that client application is developed using Angular. His domain is domain 1, and from domain 1 he is making a Ajax call to your API. Then in that case you will get this course issue, right? Then how we can bypass this, how we can allow right cross origin resource request, right, from a different browser to access our application. That is what we are going to discuss, right? We will basically face this problem when we are working with Web API, right? ASP.NET Web API. And the same problem is also in ASP.NET Core Web API. How we can allow few domain to access, right? This domain can access my resource. How I can allow that all domain can access my resource, right? All these things are possible. That is what we are going to discuss. Those people who are working, they might know what exactly this problem is all about, right? We will create this problem and we will resolve this problem, and then we will understand what exactly this problem and how to resolve this problem in our application, right? So basically, if you remember, I have created a separate session, ASP.NET Core Web API with Angular. In that case, the client application I will develop using Angular. The backend I'm going to develop using ASP.NET Core Web API. And whenever I'm going to perform the database CRUD operation, at that time this problem will come, that is course issue. And then I will show you how you can resolve this problem, right? So validation means this feature is supported by all the four methods, and validation is basically to validate the requested data. Whenever we are sending the request to the server right from the client might send some data. Then we need to check whether the data is validated or not, right? That functionality is provided to all the four methods. So for this purpose, by default, they are providing some data annotation attribute. If you are working with MVC and Web API, then you might know this data annotation attribute required, right? Attribute, right? String length, max, mean, right? All these things are available. Those are also we are going to use. Apart from this, we are also going to use Fluent API validation, right? So this is the most demanded one, right? Mostly demanded one. Why I'm saying, because in my project, right, we people are prefer to use Fluent API over data annotation because of two reasons, right? First of all, I don't know Fluent API giving better performance that data annotation. Second thing is that conditional based validation is not supported with this data annotation attribute, right? Suppose you are creating a model, and in that model, if you specify some attribute, then that attribute definitely going to be checked, right, for each model. But if you want that if the username is this, right, if the value is this, then I only need to perform validation for this and this. And for that, if the value is not this, then I don't want to do validation for these properties, right? That means conditional based validation is not possible using data annotation, but that is possible using Fluent API. So I'm going to discuss both of these options, right? How you can use data annotation and how you can use Fluent API, right? I will show you this thing. And second, and next one is formatter mapping, right? Formatter mapping means apart from AddRazorPages method, all other methods support this formatter mapping. See, one of the RESTful principle is content negotiation. Can anybody tell me what do you mean by content negotiation? Who are working with ASP.NET Web API and MVC? Anybody having any idea related to content
The,
negotiation?
the
It will support
communication between
all
yeah,
the formats like XML, JSON, or anything, any format.
Right. So content
uh,
negotiation means the client
communication
will,
between the browser and
yes, no,
the communication between the browser and the web API. Like, let us suppose I'm giving a request to the my web API. So what is the format the response will be? That can be an XML format, that can be a JSON format,
exactly,
that can
exactly.
be any format that is requested by the client, will be returned by the
Server.
the web API. That is nothing
Right.
but a communication between the client and the server. Like,
Exactly.
in which
Exactly.
format
Exactly. Exactly. So basically the client will decide in which format I want the response, and the server is going to try to return the response in that particular format. Not all those, the content negotiation means, well, it is not on demand, right? I'm expecting the XML means that doesn't mean the server is going to return me the data in the XML format. If possible, he will give you the priority to try to convert the data into XML format. If not possible, then JSON, right? So basically, it is a communication mechanism. In that case, the client is going to decide in which format he want the output. The client decide, yeah, can you give me the output in a JSON format? Can you give me the output in XML format, right? If possible, then the server will try to return the data in the requested format by the client, right? If not possible, then what is the default format available? That is what the client is going to return, right? So basically, it is going to format the output, whether you want the data in JSON format or XML format. That is what is nothing but formatter mapping, right? And next feature is anti-forgery token,
Sir,
right? This,
sorry, one
yes.
question. Content negotiation you were saying, right? So, was that introduced now in .NET 6 or in previous versions of
No,
.NET
so
4?
this is not .NET 6. What I'm saying, it is one of the principle of RESTful services. right? So there are some RESTful services principle, right? Have you ever worked with the ASP.NET Web API?
Yeah, I worked with 3.1, little bit.
No,
I don't know much.
doesn't
but-
matter. Doesn't matter what version. If you work with the ASP.NET Web API, then in that case, you have the flexibility to return the data either in JSON format or in XML format or not.
Okay. Okay, sir.
So this is
Because the
not
client, if they are using XML, we can use JSON and that the content negotiation will convert it into JSON and send. That's what you're saying.
No. So that is not. See, you will not understand this concept, right? Once you start discussing the Web API concept, at that time I will explain this content negotiation in detail. So basically, until and unless I'm not showing practically, but as you are saying, you worked on ASP.NET Web API, then you should know. So can you tell me why you are using ASP.NET Web API? Why not WCF?
ASP.NET Core Web API I have worked, but I don't know much.
See, no matter. See, okay, tell me why one thing. Why you are using ASP.NET Core Web API? For what, for developing what you are using ASP.NET Core Web API?
Because Web API means just the endpoint. If the client gives the endpoint, they don't have view. Only the
So,
controller and
forget about the client. My question is not that. My question is why I'm going to use ASP.NET Core Web API for developing what? Like MVC I'm using to develop web applications, right?
yeah.
Why I'm going to
This
use
is for
ASP.NET?
APIs.
API means
APIs.
it's only for RESTful services, right?
Uh,
You heard that
Yeah.
term RESTful services?
Representational state transfer.
Exactly, you know, right? So can you
Yeah.
tell me when I will tell that this service is a RESTful service? There is some specification, right? There is some specification provided by RESTful, and if you are following those specification, then you will say that yes, this service is a RESTful service. Like suppose why I'm saying C# is a object-oriented programming language, because the object-oriented principle are implemented by C# language.
Yeah,
Similarly,
therefore,
right? Similarly, RESTful services provided some concept, some principle, right? One of the principle is content negotiation. Another principle is stateless, right? Similarly, other principle are there, right? If you are developing the application, then you need to follow the principles which is provided by RESTful, right? And please try to learn. Okay, so this is another task to you. Please try to learn what are the principle of RESTful services and just ping in the chat, right? Because if you are developing ASP.NET Core Web API, you should know why I'm developing this one. What is RESTful services? What are the principle of RESTful services, right? If you do not know, then it doesn't make any sense, because if I'm using the concept, because and I'm using I'm saying object oriented. C# is object oriented programming language, but if I don't know what are the object oriented principles, that doesn't make any sense, right? So you have to learn these things. Yes, in our coming session, once you start discussing the ASP.NET Core Web API, at that time, I'm definitely going to cover all these things. What is REST? What is RESTful services? What is SOAP? What is the difference between RESTful services and SOAP? Why people are moving from from SOAP to REST-based services, right? What are the REST principles, right? What exactly meaning of this? How you can implement those principles in your application, right? All these things we are going to cover definitely, right? But
yeah, sure.
right, but my question is, if I'm using something, then please try to learn why I'm using that thing. Clear, guys?
Yeah,
Sir,
sure, sir.
if we want
Yes.
to learn core web API means we need to learn entire web API also.
No, Web API and Core Web API, there is no difference, right? ASP.NET Web API is a different thing. ASP.NET Core Web API is a different thing. You can consider ice cream. Ice cream means that a vanilla and it is strawberry. So whichever option you want, you can use. So but both are going to be ice cream, na? So similarly, for developing Web API or RESTful services, we are having two different flavors. One is ASP.NET Web API, that is uses the .NET framework, and another one is ASP.NET Core Web API, which is uses .NET Core. Clear? Right. So the next is anti-forgery token. So this feature is unavailable for AddController method and is available for other three methods. So this exactly prevent the CSRF attack. And again, this term, right, what I'm saying here, right, it is not new in what I can say in ASP.NET Core. It is already available in ASP.NET MVC. So basically, it is basically used to identify whether the request is a forgery or not, right? Suppose you are having one HTML page, you make the request and you just copy the HTML page and you are trying to make the same request once more. So in that case, it will identify that it is a forgery request, right? So I do not handle this request and I should not execute any action method for that forgery request. And that can be avoided using this anti-forgery token concept, right? And this concept is available with the add controllers method, but not it is not available with the add controller, but for all other three methods, this is available, right? So temp data, right? Temp data view back. So not only temp data, what I'm saying, temp data view back view data, right? So these are some of the concept, right? Some of the concept which you can use to send some small amount of data from controller to a view, right? And these features are available for all method apart from add controllers method. See, add controllers means what? Basically, you need to develop when you are developing a web services, a web API. And for web API, there is no view. And if there is no view, there is no meaning of using this temp data, view back, and view data. And this is the reason why this add controller method doesn't have this functionality, and but for other three methods, similarly anti-forgery taken. So if I'm developing any web API, there is no view, right? There is no HTML content, no HTML page. Then what is the use of this? So this is the reason why add controller doesn't have this anti-forgery. Add controller doesn't have this concept. Again, if you see views, so again. Add controller doesn't have this views concept, right? So you cannot create any view if you are using this add controllers method. Pages means it is basically if you want to develop some Razor page application, then you can use this pages concept in Razor pages, right? And in that case, this page concept, right, are available with AddMvc and add Razor pages extension method, right? Again, what is Razor pages? We will discuss that. I will take one or two classes to explain the Razor pages concept, right? So basically, it is basically used to develop page focused scenario where each page having its own model and action. So currently, you can create the controller and what I can say. And that controller having action, that action can use any number and any number of views. That action can work with any model, right? But in this case, what we need to do, we need to create a page, and that page having some specific model and action, and those model and actions are going to be used inside that page. So you can compare this with your ASP.NET web form application, where there is a web form, and for that web form there is a page behind file, right? So it is something like that. I will take one or two classes to explain this ASP.NET Razor pages. Then tag helper concept is there. Basically, it is similar to your HTML helpers, and the tag helpers are not available with add controllers method. And it makes sense. Why? Because in add controllers, these tag helpers are going to be used inside a view. And this add controllers means it doesn't support the concept view. And as there is no view, then how you can use the tag helpers? And these tag helpers are basically used to generate, right, the HTML content on the server side, right? So this tag helper will generate the HTML content on the server side, and then that HTML content will send back to the client, right? So we'll discuss these tag helpers, right? And then one is memory cache. So basically, if you know, and this memory cache feature is not available for add controllers, but available with the REST 3 methods, right? So what is exactly this memory cache? So caching is one of the important concept, right, in application to improve the performance, right? If you are having some static data, the data which is not changed that frequently, like the master data, country, city, state, right? Some data which is not changed that frequently for your application. Instead of getting the data again and again from the database, returning to the UI or displaying the UI right? So instead of accessing the data again and again from the database, we can paste the data from the database, store in the memory. And this memory cache means in memory, right? There are two types of a memory. One is in memory and another one is right. Guys, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Now
sir.
we can.
Yes.
So can you repeat the sentence again, please? We couldn't listen.
Yeah. So actually, I have not say anything because internet issue is there, right? So basically,
It is stopped.
caching is used to improve the performance of your application, right? There are two types of caching. One is in-memory caching, and another one is distributed caching. In-memory caching means wherever your application is hosted, if you are storing, right, if you are using in-memory caching, then the data, right, the cache data is going to store in that particular server, and it is said to be, you can say, local web server, right? Wherever the web server is, there the cache data is going to be stored. But if you want to improve your application, you don't want to burden your server, right, by storing the caching data, you can also implement a distributed caching, right? People who are working, they know, might be know Redis cache is there, M cache is there, right? Different caching mechanism is there, where you can particularly create a separate server for storing the cache information, right? And then from this that server you can fetch the data and you can return to the data. And this memory cache, by default, what is supported, it is in memory cache. In memory cache means it is going to store the data in the same server. Clear? So these are the concept, right? And this memory cache feature is not available with this add controller method, but available with all the rest of the method.
The caching is a client side now. When a client requests a page, so server send the data, and that data is stored temporarily for some time to the client machine. That is in the
No,
browser.
that is completely wrong. Client, we are not going to store the data in the client machine. Suppose you are developing one web API. So do you think allow that your data to be stored in the client machine? So they will request you, instead of getting the data from the database, you can get the data from the server and you can return it.
So every
And
time
that
client
client,
requests the data, it will come to the client machine, right? It
so
won't
client,
store the.
so you just tell me, if a client requesting the data, then why it will be go to the client machine? So first of all, you just tell me, what do you mean by client?
Client in the browser. I am the
Browser.
user requesting some. Yes.
And if the browser requesting for some data, then that request will come to the server, or it will be request to itself only.
No, request goes to the server only. The
Yes.
desired data that is coming from the server to the client.
Yes. So then the server will decide whether I need to fetch the data from the cache or I need to fetch the data from the database.
So
Even
here
Sorry?
data will be stored in the server memory only, not in the client memory, right?
Yes,
In
yes,
case of
yes.
API.
Right. So yes, it will store in the server only. But in the server, you can decide the same server where your application is hosted. You want to store the cache data in the same server, or you can create a separate web server, right, for storing the cache data. So there are two types: in-memory caching, distributed caching. In-memory caching means it will store in the same server. Distributed caching means you can create a separate server only for storing the cache information. That is also possible.
And partial caching, what is partial caching?
So this session is not for discussing what is caching, partial caching, right? Don't think that you use that partial caching term inside your application and you are going to use this. Right? I'm not supposed to discuss how to implement caching, how to implement partial caching, all this thing. That is a separate chapter altogether. So what I'm saying, in-memory caching is supported by this. Partial caching means partially. So you just tell me, what do you mean by partial caching?
Partially,
I heard
it
this
is
term.
stored.
Partially
Yes,
means
it
what?
is
Can you
partially
please
means
elaborate?
some part of the data it stores,
Some part
which
means
is
what? There
frequently.
is there any part? Suppose I am requesting for country master. Do you think that, and I know there are 210 countries. Do you think that 105 country data it will fetch from the database and another 105 data it will take from the cache? Is that the case? What you are asking?
No.
So
Once
I never heard that partial caching. Either you can get the data from the cache or from the server, right? Yes, it is possible that whenever I'm requesting for some data, some of the data it might get from the cache or some of the data it might get from the what I can say from the database. But there is no such concept called partial cache.
Okay.
Whenever you are going to store the data in the cache, you need to implement some key value mechanism. Whatever key you provided, that key data it will get from the cache, and if you don't want, then you can get the data from the server. But I never, first time I'm hearing that particular term, partial caching. Are you implement anywhere this partial caching concept? Can you please elaborate?
No,
how
it,
you
it was it was there in the ASP.NET earlier version, ASP.NET the concept of caching
that
is
is
there.
what I'm saying. That is what I'm asking. How you implement? Can you please elaborate?
No, sir, I'm not remembering right now.
Can you please send me some reference link in the discussion group so that we can view what exactly from where you heard that partial caching term?
Okay, I will search and send you, no problem.
Because we also need to learn something. Yeah, even it might be possible that I'm not aware about that partial caching concept. Is there any partial caching means so right? It might be possible that some of the data, right? Some of the data means don't think that I'm talking about country master means 50% data it will get from the database and 50% data it will get from the server. This is not partial caching. Caching means you want to get the data from the database. It might be possible that for a particular request, some of the data it will get from the server, some of the data it will get from the cache, right? Suppose you want to return some master data, right? What are the payment method of available, right? And what are the if you are implementing some kind of what I can say country, state, and city. Suppose you are implementing country, state, city. Then in that case, one key you can create for selecting the country. One key you can create for selecting the state. Another key is for selecting the what I can say the city, right? In that case, it might be possible that you can return the country data from the cache, city data from the what I can say from the database. So that is possible. What exactly this meaning partial caching? So is that the partial caching? Some of the data I'm returning from the cache and some of the data I'm returning from the database. If that is the case, then you don't use that partial caching term, right? You are using some
Okay.
caching plus some data from the server. Okay. Now, if you ask you, right, so which method to use in our application? This basically depends which type of application you want to create. If you want to create, right, if you want to create web API application that is RESTful services, where there is no views, then you can use AddControllers extension method, right? For example, if I go to this application and if I use right? If I use this add controllers, right, then this is nothing but this will provide the services which are required for your ASP.NET Core web API. That means for RESTful services. If you want to work with AddRazorPages application, then you need to use AddRazorPages extension method. If you want to develop any model view controller application, right, then to use AddControllers with Views extension method. AddController with AddController with Views extension method. So you need to use this one. AddController with Views extension method. And sir, when to use this AddMvc? This method has all the features. This method has all the features. Means you want to develop one application where you want the Razor Pages functionality, where you want the MVC functionality, where you want the Web API functionality as well. Then in that case, you can use this AddMvc method. But if you are developing only Web API application, don't use AddMvc. Or if you are using MVC application, don't use this AddMvc. And if you are developing only Razor Pages, then don't use this AddMvc method. Why? Because if you are adding AddMvc, then it will add some of the extra features, even though which are not required for your application. For example, I'm developing Web API. I'm adding AddMvc. Then this AddMvc will require add services, right, for the views concept, right, for the anti-forgery token, for the view item data, all these things are going to be added. Even these are not required for my web API application, then why I will use those why I will include them? So basically, based on your project requirement, you need to decide which uh, service I need to use, right? But if you use AddMvc, you can develop any kind of application, right? It doesn't matter whether you are developing MVC, web API, AddRazorPages. If you use AddMvc, means it is providing all the functionality, but you should not, right? Based on your project type, right? You need to decide which action method to be used. Clear, guys?
Yes.
That's it. So anybody having any question, they can ask me now.